Hello, and welcome to St. George's College in Jerusalem. I am Mary June Nestler. I'm the course director of the college, and I lead and teach most of the study pilgrimages that the college offers. Today, we're going to visit Bethlehem. Before we take people out to holy places here at the college, which we do each day, we often do a briefing or a mini lecture or a little pilgrim talk. As we go to Bethlehem, let's learn about it before we visit. First of all, Bethlehem is not our little town of Bethlehem anymore. It's a city, really, of 200,000 plus people, 25% of whom are Christian, 75% of whom are Muslim today. In Bethlehem, it is always Christmas. And that's because there are 3 Christmases in this Holy Land. The first is Western or Roman Catholic, Western Christian, and that's on the 25th of December. The second is Eastern and Oriental Orthodox, and that is January 6th to the 7th. And finally, the Armenian Orthodox celebrate Christmas on a different calendar on January 19th. So Manger Square and its Christmas tree and all the festive lights in the town are generally up from October, even well into February. Today, millions of pilgrims come to Bethlehem each year. When did pilgrimage start in this holy city? Well, we have some intriguing references in early Christian literature, and both come from people who actually live part of their lives here in this land. The first is from the 2nd century, a noted writer called Justin the Martyr. He was born and reared in an ancient town called Neapolis, today Nablus in the West Bank. And in his early years here, he would have known easily the customs of this ancient land. We learn 2 things from Justin the Martyr, who is writing in one of his works called Dialogue with Trypho. He tells us that there was a cave in Bethlehem where Jesus was born. And he tells us also that the Magi were from Arabia, which most likely in his day implied the lands of Nabatea to the southeast of Jerusalem. The second mention is in the 3rd century by the writer Origen of Alexandria. Origen is the first writer to give us an idea that there was a specific cave that was visited by pilgrims. He says that when people visit Bethlehem, they are shown, that's his word, they are shown the cave, again mentioning a cave, in which our Lord was born. Now, let's not be too surprised at the idea that Jesus may have been born in a cave. These writers knew full well that caves were often the basements or the back rooms of houses, and they still are today in many Palestinian villages, and they also served as stables. In the 4th century CE, we see the explosion of Christian pilgrimage to the Holy Lands. Constantine the Great, or Constantine I, had become emperor both of the Western Roman Empire and also of the East by 324 CE. And he knew that in order to unify such a large empire, he was going to have to take some strong measures. And one of the things he did was to begin the process of unifying the Roman Empire religiously. Now, Constantine believed, at least in part, that he had won the victories because his armies went into his victorious battles carrying the standard of the monogram of Christ. Constantine called the bishops of the Christian churches together at a place called Nicaea, today in northwestern Turkey. And at Nicaea, the bishops of the East and the West gathered together to try to create a statement of faith that we know today as the Nicene Creed. At the Council of Nicaea in 325, they formulated the first version of the Nicene Creed. And Constantine was able, through this creed, to begin the process of some theological unity in the empire. Not all agreed, however, and that would be a centuries-long process. One of the things that may have happened at the Council of Nicaea is that the Bishop of Jerusalem, Macarius, and the Bishop of Caesarea Maritima, who was Eusebius, both of them, we know, attended the Council of Nicaea. It may have been at the council that they were able to bend the emperor's ear by asking the emperor to adorn the places in the eastern lands that were associated with the life of Jesus, to adorn them with great churches. Now, they knew full well that part of an emperor's job was precisely to build great buildings. Well, they seem to have done a good job. Constantine sent his mother, Queen Helena, the Empress Helena, who had been a Christian already. He sent his mother and a royal retinue to the Holy Land. Some of Queen Helena's involvement is probably legendary, but we do have a story of how she met with Bishop Macarius. They decided on a particular place in Bethlehem, a cave, perhaps the very cave that Origen remembered was already being shown to those who wanted to see Jesus' birthplace. She was shown a cave, and it was decided that the builders of the great emperor would place a church on top of the cave. This plan shows that remarkable building. Now, until around the 1930s, we didn't know exactly what the building might have looked like. In the 1930s, there was some excavation done that revealed some important parts of the shape of this building. Let's move from west to east. First, a typical atrium, an entry atrium for gathering the community, and then great doors, 3 of them, leading into the basilica hall. Constantine's basilica was quite grand, and he had 4 rows of immense columns that created 5 aisles within the church. The focus of the entire building, though, is on its octagonal east end, where an altar would be in a regular church. But this was no regular church. This was a church called a memoria, or a shrine church. And shrine churches were built to highlight and enshrine something important, like a grave, like a place where something had happened, and in this case, the traditional cave of the birth of our Lord. And in building an octagon over it, Constantine's builders removed the roof of the cave, created a walkway around the cave, and put beautiful mosaics around the walkway, and then pilgrims would come into the octagon up some stairs from the basilica, and they would walk around looking down through the former roof and into the cave itself. We have some other parts of Constantine's church that remain as well. Again, not known until the 1930s. Here we see the original floor of Constantine's great church that was dedicated in the year 339 CE. It is the oldest continuously used church for worship in the world. And we can see how much deeper than the later floor and the current floor these marvelous mosaics are. The mosaics are typical of the early 4th century, with 3 or 4 simple colors of black, red, and cream. They include geometric design and fruits and vegetables. What is to be noted here? No pictures of animals, no pictures of people. Constantine's basilica was used until it was largely damaged in the Samaritan revolts of 529 CE. Fortunately, another great Byzantine emperor, Justinian I, decided to rebuild the church in Bethlehem for both political reasons to solidify his power in the East, but also for religious reasons. He was a devout Christian himself. And he kept part of the design of the church. You can see here on this plan, you can see that he kept the 5-aisled 4 rows of column basilica part, but instead of an atrium on the west end, which is at the left side of your plan, he placed a narthex. And on the right, instead of having that octagonal structure whose roundness, the octagon, was meant to focus on its center where the cave was, he changed to having 3 apses. He put in a north and south transept, each ending in an apse, and an eastern end, where he also placed the first altar in the church. Now, when pilgrims come to visit the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem today, it's pretty much Justinian's building, which we believe was finished in the latter part of his reign. He died in 565 CE, and we now know from some recent remarkable study with a rather new field of archaeology called architectural stratigraphy, we know from the study published in 2012 that the archaeologists believe the building you walk in today was built entirely, its viewable walls, by Justinian in the mid-6th century CE. Justinian, besides those changes in the shape of the church, he wanted his pilgrims to be able to actually walk down into the cave itself. And so he created stairs that go down. You'll see the downstairs on the right side of the slide, and then the stairs up. So pilgrims can go down right into the cave and pray. Beneath the altar, there's a lovely 14-pointed star, and there's a hole in the center of the star, and it's customary for pilgrims today to kneel and to place their arms through the hole in the center to reach down and touch the floor of the cave. It is so moving for pilgrims to pray in the cave of Jesus' birth. Is it the exact place? That we cannot say. But what we can say with certainty, and what I feel is so deep and spiritual, is that when we do go and pray there, we're praying with 1,700 years of pilgrims, and we feel their spiritual energy in that place, right down to the wonderful Christians of this land who are our hosts in these holy sites. Now, when one comes out of the Cave of the Birth, we can go back down the main hall of the church to the south aisle and see another thing that Justinian put in to his church for the first time. In the 6th century, there was a baptismal font, though we don't know exactly where it was in his day. Now, we've known the font existed. We thought we knew what it looked like. For centuries, it has been covered with a kind of concrete plaster sort of mixture. We knew its outer shell was badly damaged, a shell made of the pinky brown limestone, similar to the columns in the church. Now, in a huge program of restoration was begun in 2013 by the Palestinian Authority. This $20 million program is nearly completed in 2020. And one of the last things to be addressed was the cleaning and examination of Justinian's font. Perhaps you read in the international news what happened when the archaeologists took out that plaster concrete kind of filling, and lo and behold, beneath it was a font within a font. This one made of beautifully carved white limestone. Today, the restoration artisans from Italy and the archaeologists and historians who have now studied this since its discovery in 2019 believe that both the inner font and the outer font date from Justinian's period of the 6th century. So it is very possible to find something exciting and brand new in something as old as this church. I mentioned that it's the shape of Justinian's church that pilgrims walk in today. But in the 12th century, after the arrival of the Crusaders from Europe in 1099, there were a lot of decorative changes made by Crusader and local artisans. In particular, a huge project of wall mosaics was installed in the church, and with typical features of Byzantine mosaic. Now, we believe that most of the upper walls of the church were in fact covered with a mosaic program that highlighted church councils and highlighted some of the important events in the life of Jesus. Sadly, quite a bit of that mosaic is no longer on the wall, but the remaining mosaic is remarkable. First of all, in this close-up, we can see a couple of things that are particular to mosaic work in the Eastern Empire, and one particular to Bethlehem. The first is that pilgrims often go into stores in Bethlehem and they see a lot of mother-of-pearl jewelry for sale. That is, in fact, a typical craft here in Bethlehem. And if you look carefully, do you see the white mother-of-pearl shining from these mosaics? Also, yes, that is real gold. Gold leaf is placed in a sandwich between two clear glass blocks, and the blocks are placed at angles when they're set into the plaster on the wall to capture the light and to make the mosaics look like they're sparkling. Now there's something brand new here in these mosaics. On the northern wall of the nave, way high up where the windows are, a technician was examining the walls with a particular kind of machinery that is able to detect what is underneath a wall, and lo and behold, the technician found an angel deep beneath plaster. This mosaic angel was discovered in 2016, and it has been beautifully restored. Visitors to the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem before the restoration project that began in 2013 would have seen a church that was much darker than it is today. Part of the whole restoration was the cleaning of the church. Now, I will bet you that 1,500 years of candle grime, lamp soot, and people dirt were lying on the walls and the columns of this church. It took quite a bit of careful cleaning and restoring, and today we see the beautifully brighter church. It's also possible for us to see the Crusader paintings that are at the top of each column far better than we used to be able to see them. When the Crusaders came, they brought with them saints that were familiar and images of saints that were familiar to them. So most of the columns have paintings that were not familiar to local Orthodox Christians in the 12th century when they were painted. Will you join me now on a visit inside the church? And we're going to go into the grand entrance. Oh, wait a minute. There is no grand entrance to the Church of the Nativity. There was in Justinian's day, but today there's a tiny little door. Here you can see the beautiful lintel that was the upper part of the grand central door of the church finished in the 6th century. But in the 12th century, that door was partially blocked, and the Crusaders built a smaller, typical medieval arched doorway. Sometime in the last 400 to 600 years, in the Ottoman period, the doorway was made even smaller, so that today you actually have to bend over to go inside. Some say the door is so small to keep horseback riders from riding straight into the church. But what is more likely is that the door was made smaller so that people who were bringing carts into the church drawn by horses couldn't steal the beautiful marble that lined the lower walls of the church, as they were doing, couldn't steal it, put it in their cart, and drive it away. So now we're going to go into the church, bow your head, come in through the door of humility, as it's called today, and we enter now the hall of the church and join other pilgrims who are eagerly looking at the new discoveries of the mosaics under the current floor and the beautiful shining light in the newly cleaned church. We'll move now to the front of the church, where we go back down into the cave of the birth. And here we are on Christmas Eve, recently with the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, Theophilus III, who is there in the liturgy of Christmas Eve, giving his Christmas blessing to the world. So Merry Christmas from Bethlehem, whatever time of the year it may be.